Hi, my name is Brian Campbell, and this is my presentation on Sharon Bird's article, Welcome to the Men's Club. There are 4 learning objectives. The first objective, I want you to understand how a group of men non-sexually attracted to one another maintain a boys' talk mentality and structure. The second objective is how in their groups, any who don't conform to the hegemonic masculinity are marginalized or suppressed entirely. The third objective is that there's a clear distinction between a hegemonic masculinity and non-hegemonic masculinity, such as homosexual masculinity, which is regarded as effeminate. The fourth objective is to analyze the 3 meanings that are crucial, according to Bird, to how male homosociality helps perpetuate hegemonic masculinity. The first is emotional detachment, the second is competitiveness, and the third is the sexual objectification of women. Bird's thesis is to study how through male homosocial heterosexual interactions, hegemonic masculinity is maintained as the norm to which men are held accountable despite individual conceptualizations of masculinity that depart from that norm. Basically, what Dr. Bird does is studies and interviews men in a homosocial heterosexual group to see how the hegemonic masculinity is the norm or dominant masculinity. Even when the individual members disagree with the norm, they still hold themselves accountable to it. The evidence. Homosociality. It's the preference for the company of and non-sexual attractions held by men or women for members of their own sex. Now there are 3 parts of a hegemonic masculinity. Emotional detachment, males detaching themselves from feelings, vulnerability, or any expressions of intimacy, such as crying. Competitiveness. Men trying to dominate each other in a sport, activity, or just for the attention of women. And last, you have the sexual objectification of women. Men boast of their sexual conquests, peacocking, and by doing so feel superior to women and more a part of their homosocial group. Another piece of evidence is when the personal ideals and morals are suppressed in the homosocial group or by individual men, the hegemonic masculinity can continue unchecked. And what they're saying there is when an individual is silent and doesn't speak up in the group about the problems with the hegemonic masculinity, then the problems persist, basically unchecked. What Bird did is observe groups in a deli bar of the same academic community, but different from the group of men that she interviewed. And staying true to the hegemonic masculinity, the interviewed men said that feelings or, quote, personal stuff, unquote, you just don't talk about. Emotional detachment means having no emotions or feelings are allowed in the group. And then when someone does violate the rule or show emotion, then they are excluded, instead of changing or altering the norm. Competitiveness. This starts at a very early age, and even if they aren't aggressive, they will fake it to avoid exclusion or ridicule. When a woman enters the group, the men compete for her attention. Objectification. Even if you wouldn't degrade or make an insulting comment about a woman, you will agree or pretend to agree to be a part of the group. For my application of the ideas, I grabbed a film clip from the movie Grown Ups. I think it's a perfect example of hegemonic masculinity because you have a group of gentlemen standing there, and then an attractive young lady says, "Hey, Dad." They all look at each other thinking they could be the dad, when finally Rob Schneider comes out and says, "What?" You realize he's the father. The other four men sit there and objectify this young lady and insult the fifth member of their group who is now talking with his daughter. And it's just a perfect representation of that homosocial group. When you get that group of men together, the conversations that ensue. I mean, it pans from the men sitting there with their mouths open, drooling over her, getting steam blown out over her clothes as it pans down all over her body. And then when they pan back to the gentlemen, they're all sitting down with drinks in Adirondack chairs, basically to enjoy the show. I could not come up with a better idea. I know there are plenty out there. I mean, movies are loaded with them, but this one, to me, just kind of summed everything up in what Bird was talking about with hegemonic masculinity. For my discussion questions, I came up with 3. What makes a man put his values and morals aside just to seem to fit in with a homosocial group that perpetuates this hegemonic masculinity? And then on the flip side of that, what type of man asks another man to put his values and morals aside in order to be a part of a homosocial group that perpetuates homosocial masculinity? And lastly, why is objectification of women and the need to feel superior to them in a homosocial setting so important for some men? And the last slide I have is the work cited, which I believe is pretty self-explanatory. You have Dr. Bird's article, you have Jean Lippman Blumen's article that I read as more research for this presentation, then you have the work cited for the clip from Grown Ups. Thank you. Have a pleasant day.